Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. Glad you could join us for this live webinar on the Mattress Recycling Council and their research program and funding opportunities. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Boconfuso. I'm President and CEO of the UIDP, and we are joined today by Mike Gallagher, who's a research consultant for the Mattress Recycling Council, which established a research program several years ago. Mike is passionate about sustainable innovation, and he serves as an executive advisor and consultant in a variety of public-private sector partnerships focused on developing and bringing energy-efficient, low environmental impact innovations responsibly into the marketplace. So we're really fortunate to have Mike today to tell us about their program. Before we get started, I wanted to go over some logistics with you. If you lose connectivity or there's problems on the audio on your computer, you can certainly dial in using your phone. That's a great way to join in, and most of the time you won't have any problems if you go that way. We also would like to get a sense of who's on the call. So maybe we'll do a quick poll. So if you could tell us how you're joining us or what your organization is, it might be useful in helping us think about the questions later on. So once we get enough responses, we'll close this out, 30 seconds or so. Okay, great. All right, so we have about half the university folks, a quarter from industry, and then either government or other research organizations. Okay, I got a little ahead of myself. I did want to make a few other logistical comments, and then we'll get into the throes of the webinar. On occasion, people will lose connectivity. Sometimes we lose connectivity. If we lose connectivity and you're still connected, do not hang up. We'll reestablish connectivity as quickly as possible, and you'll automatically be re-engaged with the webinar if that happens. It's happened, I think I've done a lot of these, and I think it's happened to me once, so please just stay connected if for some reason we lose you. I also want to just do a quick disclaimer. We're very pleased to offer these type of webinars in support of our community, but I'm not going to read all this to you, but this is just a quick disclaimer regarding this webinar. We're pleased to offer this in partnership with the Mattress Recycling Council, but just a quick reminder about some of the issues regarding this webinar. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Mike Gallagher, who will take about 30 minutes to run through a presentation, give you an overview of this relatively new funding opportunity that's offered through the Mattress Recycling Council, and then we'll open it up for questions. I would note, if you look to the right of your screen, there's that command panel. You can insert your questions at any time. So if Mike, a few minutes from now, makes you want to ask a question, go ahead and insert that. And at the end, we'll queue up those questions and we'll do them in sequence with Mike. Okay, with that, I will stop talking and turn it over to my colleague, Mike Gallagher. Mike?
Right. Thank you, Tony. And it's certainly a pleasure to be here to talk about the Mattress Recycling Council. Again, my role is to help shape the strategy of the research program and to manage the projects. Next slide, please. In my outline of my presentation, I'll go over a little bit about the Mattress Recycling Council in case you're not familiar with it. I should also point out that there is a handout available that can also give you information. You can click on that tab as well. I'll then move on into the research program goals, the things that we're concerned about, the challenges we face, the things that we're looking to try and see in terms of new research projects. Then we'll talk about specific funding opportunities and finish up with how to engage with the Mattress Recycling Council. Next slide. So Mattress Recycling Council is actually born out of a collaboration between state governments interested in establishing mattress recycling laws. They collaborated with the International Sleep Products Association. This is an association of mattress manufacturing industry, and it's been around for over 100 years, very well respected organization. The result of that collaboration around the 2013-14 timeframe led to legislation being adopted in some states, and then as a result, Mattress Recycling Council was formed. At that time also, it was important, it was recognized important to have a public-facing information platform, and that's called Bye Bye Mattress. And there's more information on this at the end of the presentation and on the MRC website. Next slide. So at present, 3 states have adopted manufacturing laws, and MRC administers the recycling operations in those jurisdictions. As you can see, these were launched in the early 2015 through to May 2016. From a start of basically 0, now we have reached over 6 million mattresses recycled. Recycling rates are around 75%, meaning that 75% of the weight of a mattress is recovered and sent to useful products in secondary markets. At present, we're recycling about 1.7 million mattresses per year, and even steadily grown through the pandemic. Next slide. Other jurisdictions are looking at adopting mattress recycling regulations themselves, and MRC is working with them. These are some of those that are considering. So the nice thing is about it is success breeds success, and I can see in the future that it's very likely that MRC will continue to grow and into other regions of the country. Next slide. Just a little bit of information, about 15 million mattresses are discarded every year in the United States. MRC, doing about 1.7 million per year, is the largest mattress recycling organization in the United States. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've demonstrated that more than 75% of a mattress can be recycled. This slide here gives you an idea of what is recovered and where it goes. Foam padding is predominantly going into carpet underlay applications, some in animal bedding. Fabric and fibers can be used in filtration applications and other textile applications. Steel springs goes to the scrap steel market. Wood frames go into landscaping and mulch materials. There are other materials, but these are the main components. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the mattress recycling process itself. It's a fairly low-tech, sort of labor-intensive brute force industry. You give a bunch of guys box cutters, they physically cut open the mattresses, they separate the components into different piles, and then those are baled and shipped to the secondary markets. Fuel is separated and is either ground up to be mulch or used as a secondary fuel or as a fuel source. I should point out that in California, even though wood may be incinerated for fuel value, it is not allowed to be calculated in recycling rates. So any data that you see on recycling rates does not include incineration. And then steel, as I mentioned, goes to the steel market, the scrap steel market. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the output. I used California because it's the largest state. And I know it's a busy chart here, but there's a few points I would like to make. Is just under 1.5 million pounds of, 1.5 million units were recycled in California in 2019. That amounted to a little more than 56 million pounds of material that were recycled. And this is a breakdown. Mostly steel is the largest and heaviest component. Wood, foam, quilt toppers represent all 4 of those things, about 78% of the materials that were recycled. And some others, as you can see below there, much smaller levels. I think it's important to realize that 75% means that 25%, around 18 million pounds or so, does go to landfill. We're always looking to reduce that number and understand why things are not recovered, and that's part of our research program. Sometimes it helps to just sort of take this to a unit level. An average mattress is about 53 pounds. Nearly 40 pounds is recycled, and about 13 pounds are sent to landfill or incinerated. Next slide. So now moving on to the research program itself. Every project we do in the research program needs to map to one of these 5 goals. The graphic on the left, I think, gives you maybe a nice pictorial view of what we're trying to do. Recycling rates are the key performance indicator that are used. This is important to demonstrate that we have high recycling rates to our stakeholders. These include government officials, these include the mattress industry itself, and of course, the recyclers as well. To do this, we want to make sure the processes, the recycling process itself is as efficient as possible, that it's done in a sustainable way, and think of sustainability not just a narrow sense of environmental impact, but sustainable in terms of economic health and social benefits, in terms of things beyond just environmental impact. And then perhaps the most important thing is the program continues to grow. We need to find new uses for the products that are recovered and diversify the markets. Many of the products that are recovered wind up going into low-cost, mature to declining markets that are vulnerable to the economic cycle. I've been around long enough to see recycling industries rise and fall as part of the economic cycle. So we obviously want a robust program that would survive economic changes, economic cycle changes. And to do that is one good strategy is diversify the markets that you serve. Next slide, please. I want you to sort of think about our research program strategy in this sort of way. At present, the cost of recycling exceeds the value of the materials generated. So on the left there, you see the sort of below the line type things that we look to do to reduce the cost of recycling as much as possible. Obviously, we want to reduce landfill costs. That costs about 4 to 5 cents a pound. Anything we can do to make the throughput increase out of the recycling organizations, we will look at seriously. Logistics are interesting. We, in California, as an example, there are over 200 collection sites going to 9 manufacturing sites. Logistics actually represent nearly 20% of the cost of recycling. To just get things from the consumer drop-off to through the recycling process is a fairly expensive undertaking. And then labor, as I mentioned, is fairly labor intensive. And so to try to create those tipping points, we do that, but it doesn't mean much unless we also grow the top line and develop new markets, increase more demand for the products. At present, we also do a lot of what I call is downcycling. We kind of grind up the materials that are recovered and they're used as fillers or to support other projects there, but they don't really add value in the processing. And so the price that's received for those products is fairly low. And I like to look at this myself as these are valuable raw materials, which with further refinement can actually be created, transformed is the better word, into more valuable products that will generate more revenue in the market. In many cases, we're not very far from these kinds of tipping points. And sometimes, yes, we look at, we want to hit, I'll mention this point later, home runs, but sometimes singles are just all we need to really make a big difference in this industry. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take the, can you click on that again? I think this is an animated slide. Okay, so the important point here is demand is perhaps our highest priority type of research project. I've mentioned it quite a bit already. There are a lot of headwinds in getting organizations to accept post-consumer products. There's an added uncertainty of the variability of the materials. There's contamination concerns. There's risk to processes. The economics can sometimes be tough to manipulate or challenge to move around. And then the time and development cost to get a new product to the market is very long and sometimes complex. Next slide. So this thing, again, is probably our main goal for having this webinar is to say we need ideas to transform these materials here on the right side of the slide into new applications. Foundation wood going into mulch, basically no value is created by that. In many cases, recyclers do not get any revenue for recovered wood. Foam is carpet underlay, a mature market that we need other uses for foam to be developed. Shoddy is the felt pad between the springs and the mattress foam. That's usually made from recycled PET from the textile industry. There are other components in there as well. It's pretty variable. A lot of different manufacturers take different approaches to making that felt layer, but in summary, it's almost all going to landfill. Quilt textiles are chopped up and go into carpet underlay, and textile recycling is actually an interesting and growing field. So we look for ideas in improving, diversifying markets there. And the other ones actually are challenges, but they're smaller challenges themselves, but we're always looking for how we can find new uses for cotton, the other fibers recovered. Steel is perhaps one where we're in pretty good shape, although even there we have some challenges I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide, please. So these are just pictures of what are recovered, and you can see the concern on the foundation wood about contamination, and that the current separation methods leave fabric and sometimes metal staples into the wood, and so processes to purify the wood, separate the metal out, are things that we've explored. Quilt toppers, many of them are recycled. Those that are not are often because of contaminants that are introduced to the quilt topper. They can be soiled, they can be wet, etc. That product stream is, again, mostly goes into carpet. There's the steel, and I mentioned on the bottom right, the pocketed coils. This is, if you're not familiar with the pocketed coil mattress, these are springs that are wrapped in usually polypropylene coils individually, and they help isolate movement in the mattress. So if you've seen the commercials where there's a wine glass on the bed and somebody's bouncing on the bed and the wine glass doesn't spill, that's likely because it's a pocket coil mattress construction. These have proven to be very difficult to recycle because it's very difficult to separate the individual pockets from the sleeves. Next slide. And these are pictures of the other fibers. I think that's wool, I'm not sure. Foam is baled, and we're pretty familiar with that. That's what the cotton looks like, and that's what the shoddy felt pad looks like. Next slide. So in our challenges, and start talking about, well, what drives us in some of our research project goals. We've shown and demonstrated, starting from zero, we've come a long way in a very short period of time. Recycling rates in California, just for example, have increased now from about 60 or so percent to about 75%. The number of units have also increased from a little less than 1 million in 2016 to nearly 1.5 million. I think we're actually passing 1.5 million this year. So we're generating more product, and we're seeing new states on the horizon. It's not all that out of the realm of possibility that in 5 years or so, with new states and continued improvement in the recycling operations, that we might need to find uses for maybe as much as 30 million pounds of additional recycled product. Next slide, please. So what we have done to address this challenge is we've set up an open request for proposals. If you go to the Mattress Recycling Council website research page, you will find this proposal request on the website. It was established early last year. It is an open RFP, meaning that we will continue to run this request for proposals perpetually. So if you have an idea about generating a new market, please, this is a very good resource to go through what we're interested, the types of products we're looking for, and other information about being involved in this project. Next slide, please. I'll go quickly through the other types of things on the wheel. So we've covered demand pretty fully, but efficiency, our pipeline here is very strong. While market demand is sort of hard to see and hard to do, efficiency is always easy to see. Everybody wants it, and it's fairly easy to do because it's a fairly low-tech industry, and there are many, many innovations out there from other industries, et cetera, that can be applied to mattress recycling. So while we'll always look for projects there, it's something that I think that the pipeline is actually pretty strong. But again, if you have an idea to reduce throughput, increase throughput, reduce cost, or improve quality, we obviously want to hear it. Next slide. The other wheel is sustainability, and this is actually, the research program was essentially started up in the beginning of 2019. Those were our first calls for proposal. And as we've gone through now just about 2 years of operation, one thing we've learned as we've grown is how important it is to be good product stewards and understand the environmental impact, the robustness of the industry moving forward, and how to maybe expand and collaborate with other supply chain stakeholders. Next slide, please. So one thing we've seen is a number of organizations have approached us about the desire for creating a circular economy for mattresses. Raw material suppliers, component suppliers, et cetera, have expressed interest and willing to contribute to this. They see MRC as a very useful resource in getting information so they can design and incorporate better products and incorporate them into mattresses of the future. So I took the sort of circular economy wheel and just sort of laid it out linearly here and looked at this from a what is the upstream supply chain focus? How do we improve the industry from that perspective? And of course, the downstream focus. So one thing that we're doing right away, this will be launched in the first quarter of 2021, is a LCA study focused from consumer end of life mattress delivered to a collection site all the way through to new end uses. We think this will be useful baseline data to guide decisions about alternative recycling technologies, about the impact of new markets to make sure they're safe for use, et cetera. And there's some activities underneath this. I'll talk about one that's an upstream one and one that's a downstream one in the next two slides. But the idea, what we want to have here is this is sort of a learning exercise. As we do these studies, we're going to learn much more about what are the capability gaps in creating a supply chain channel. We'll bring those into a discussion forum with the industry stakeholders, bring our data, facilitate collaboration, and hopefully we'll set a cycle of continuous improvement and development of a circular economy. Next slide, please. So one is, surprisingly, we really do not know a lot about the materials that were covered. I'll use foam as an example. In the last 10 years or so, there have been quite a bit of innovations in mattress foams. We've seen bed in the box grow, which is a way to compress a mattress for low-cost shipping. We've seen new growth in memory foams. We have conventional foams. We have high resilient foams. So there are many, many different sources of foam. There are also latex foams. So some are natural rubber, some are synthetic rubber. And so getting our arms around what is the statistical description of those waste streams is very important. It's very important for informing people who are interested in exploring what it takes to handle post-consumer mattress materials. So it's important data. Also, along the life of a mattress, there may be things, water contamination is one example of extractable additives, and we need to understand potential environmental impacts going forward. This is for anyone who uses a post-consumer material, they're going to want to have this information. And we also see new products, new materials introduced into the market channel, the supply channel, such as one example is phase change materials, which are designed to improve sleep comfort. And as these are introduced and they come into the recycle stream at end of life, we need a strategy to handle those materials and hopefully convert them back into the market in useful applications. So next slide, please. On the other side is we also want to understand what is thrown out and why. This, I think, will be very useful in design for recycling discussions with upstream stakeholders. Both this project and the previous one I mentioned on the materials characterization studies are going to be launched in 2021. And it's sort of important to pay attention to these projects that are underway, because we hope that they will give us new insights as to things we can work on for the future, and that will probably lead to another broader request for proposals. Next slide, please. So just to sort of drop this into a picture, the sustainability aspect of the research program, what we're trying to do is lay the foundation for creating a circular economy for mattress materials. The metrics there to the right, I think I won't read them all, but this, I understand the presentation will be distributed, so you can get an idea of our thinking about how important it is for us to make sure we have a optimal carbon footprint, that we are not sending material to landfill, that we have economically and ecologically viable processes for the long term. Next slide, please. So let's talk about how to engage. To get to this next level, we need support from the innovation community, people like you. We can't do it ourselves. We're a fairly small organization. We have a lot of complex challenges, and it's important to have organizations like yours involved. Next slide, please. So in thinking through our calls for proposals, our award process, what we did in our strategies, we wanted to make it very, very easy to submit an idea or concept, a minimal effort, so that we can understand how many good ideas are out there and hopefully fund as many as we can. And yes, I mentioned everyone wants home runs, but I'll repeat that point, is sometimes simple innovations can be strung together to create new system solutions that can bring us to those tipping points we seek. Next slide. So if you go to the Mattress Recycling Council website research page, you'll see this pre-concept, pre-application concept submission form. Sorry, that's a lot of words. We'll have to think of a better way to say that. But basically what we're saying is take a half an hour. We'll define our problems. We'll call to mind what our strategy is for improving the industry. But if you have an idea, just take a half an hour, write out the concept on paper. Give us whatever background information you have, what your team is composed of, and what its technical readiness, what the solution you have in mind, and how technical ready is it. What that does is that prompts a conversation with us. And we value that idea sharing, idea discussion aspect probably more than anything, because we learn so much. We can share with you sort of our goals, maybe shape that concept into what we would look for in a full proposal. And we'll review that within the MRC leadership. And if we like what we see, we will request a full proposal be submitted. And that's where, again, then we want a lot more detail. What's the budget? What's the work plan? What are the deliverables? What's the value that is being created? But I've worked with universities and other research institutes for many, many years. And I do understand that so much energy, I almost think is wasted energy, is writing proposals with a sometimes less than 20% success rate. Our idea is that, yeah, that might be in the pre-proposal stage. We'll reject far more than we accept. But if we invite you to write a full proposal, we're very serious, and there's in all likelihood, provided there's a good plan and good deliverables, we're going to likely more than not award a research contract. Okay, so next slide, please. Common questions about research, a research program and the contracts and what's in them. So I'll go through a few of these, and I'm sure there'll be further questions about them. Intellectual property always comes up early. Mattress Recycling Council is a nonprofit organization. So in a sense, what we really do, we want to do for the benefit of the mattress recycling industry as a whole. We don't particularly want to have the burden of owning and managing intellectual property. So our default position is that for this kind of research inventions, we would prefer that the innovator maintain ownership of that intellectual property. So I'm sure that's good news for many universities. The only things that we require, the only strings that we have on the intellectual property are that for copyright, broader sense, not just patents, but all intellectual property, we do need to report to stakeholders such as state regulators. We have an annual report where we need to provide information. So we need to be able to make those the findings of our research projects in the public domain. So the language will have some things about that. And of course, we also want to make sure that the path of innovations going to market are as unencumbered as possible. So we would like to know if IP is abandoned or if IP is used, so that we're understanding and helping to prepare the industry for those innovations. We prefer things to be published and put in the public domain, but we also realize there may be commercial interests with innovation. So obviously we are well equipped to handle confidential information, and most certainly will not disclose confidential data to regulators or other public entities that is generated by the innovators. When all things are equal, we prefer some cost share. We do have limits on our awards, and sometimes it's hard to fit what we would like to do and what the cost of the project is. So that is something that is encouraged but not required. Often there are questions asked about how much can I get access to MRC data or industry data? And the answer is we have quite a bit of data. We've been operating for 5 years. We have a lot of internal knowledge. So absolutely, yes, we can help equip you. And I think that's part of the key of those collaborative discussions. If you have an idea, we can help shape that idea with some of our data and lead to stronger research programs. And of course, we have a fairly strong, extensive network upstream and downstream from recycling operations, along with recyclers themselves. So we do like to kind of mix and match and say, hey, you know what, we like this idea, but maybe you might want to talk with so-and-so to even make that a better program. So hopefully that answers a few of the questions you might have. Next slide, please. These are some resources to get more information after this webinar. We have a website, we have a newsletter. I think if you send, some of our marketing people are on, so if you send us a request to be on our newsletter, we do announce new awards. We announce upcoming RFPs and other information about mattress recycling on our newsletter, which goes out monthly. Our annual report, the link is there. It's a very good resource if you want to read about mattress recycling. Those 400-page reports will tell you about everything you need to know. And of course, we encourage dialogue. So you can feel free to email either me or my colleague, Abby Beam, who are on the research team overseeing the program. Send us a note, and if we can answer the question, we will. Next slide. So just to conclude, these are our priorities. Increase efficiency, improve recyclability, expand end markets, and help us make this robust and sustainable for the long-term future. Appreciate your attention today, and I think we'll now turn it over to the folks to handle questions.
Okay, great. Mike, really informative. Once again, I want to applaud you and your colleagues for running what seems to be a fairly straightforward and easy to access. It really resonates with me when you mentioned the kind of early, simple one-pager that provides baseline information that you can triage. I think like you said, researchers really appreciate it. You know, they don't want to spend a lot of time putting something together and then turn out it's out of scope or whatever. So sounds like a great process. Let me ask you some, what I would say are, you know, fairly um, technical questions about the grant process itself. And while I'm doing this, this is an opportunity for you, for those of you who are online watching this, to ask questions. We have several questions queued up, but I want to ask some things that I think probably many of you are interested to know. So, Mike, just on the logistical or technical aspects of the grant process itself, um, do you all provide overhead in the budget, or do you even require a detailed budget, or do you just, you know, do people just make a request and then you just fund an amount based on your interest?
Okay, yeah. So one quick minor thing is that these are not grants per se, because that's
Okay.
kind of government agencies do, but they are research contracts where awards are made.
Research contracts. Okay, great. Thank you.
But yes, we are fairly unstructured in terms of requirements at this point. That may change. Overheads are certainly allowed. We've done this. We understand universities have those challenges there. So things like tuition for students, or
Mhm.
research, or university overheads can be included. Up to now, we've not capped those,
Mhm.
but we may in the future. I think our main thing is we want to make sure that the majority of the money goes to the research, right? So
Sure.
if I see a project with watered down deliverables and timelines, obviously we're going to say, hey, we can't handle 50 or
Sure.
60% of the project being sent to overhead. So up to this point, we've more capped award limits and not
Sure.
really gotten into the details. This being said, the budgets do need a good justification, because we are subject to audit by regulators, and we have to
Sure.
demonstrate that we're spending money responsibly.
Okay, great. Well, uh, you know, I talk all the time about cost and value, and I think that sounds to me like what you're looking at as it relates to making these research awards, looking at the value that you're getting relative to the cost. So good for you all. Couple of questions that I wanted to ask you about the intellectual property. You know, you said that it stays with the inventor. Um, there are some programs that want individuals to apply versus an organization, but maybe you can just give clarity on that. If I'm a faculty member at a university or a postdoc, can I apply as an individual, or do I have to apply through the university? Because obviously that has, in the U.S., has big impact on intellectual property ownership rights.
I don't have a strong opinion on that, Tony. It's kind of the metrics we have in knowing that we have a successful research program is how much intellectual property are we creating. So we want to
Mhm.
know about it. And the other thing is we want to see it, available to the market, whether it's a licensing strategy or it's
Sure.
a setting up a small business or whatever. So in the projects we've had, just in our infancy, we've had a few innovators definitely file for patents. Some have been individual, some have been organizational. I don't think our whole purpose here is to de-risk the front end of innovation, take it to a certain point, but then as a nonprofit, we have to sort of step back and let market forces dictate where it
Sure.
goes. So I think probably the best guidance I could give is put on your, talk with your business schools, talk about your launch strategies and et cetera, and find a path to market. That's why we're doing all this.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I know this is early in the process for you guys too. You're still trying to figure out the best pathways. Let me continue down that about eligibility. Based on what you said, it sounds to me like if you're a small company with an interest in this, you could apply. If you're a postdoc, even, or maybe a research faculty member, are there any strict limitations on who is eligible to apply?
So in the RFP, we do talk about who's eligible, but yes, small business, large business, research institutes, even national labs can apply. The only things that I think that really come to mind in terms of new market creation is where we might get a little suspect is if someone is trying to basically uh, manage or manipulate the market. You know, anything kind of thing that's an antitrust kind of thing.
Sure.
So we'll stay away from things of doing research programs on established technologies. If they're in the public domain, we really don't want to get involved in things that are already invented. So, and that's probably the most common reason why we might reject a concept paper, say, well, that's already being done, so we don't need to invent that wheel. But no, I think here we're trying to be as open as we can in creation of new markets.
Okay. I know you're relatively, it's a relatively new program. Are there a list of awards with award amounts available? Is that, have you guys publicized that or posted that or done anything in that regard? Or if someone wanted to know, want that information, is that something you're making available?
Yeah, we definitely on the research page make announcements of awards. We also do in the newsletter. We have not, to my knowledge, really published award amounts, but we've talked about what the goals are, the organization involved. We find that it's good for the innovator and good for us to show that projects are moving forward.
Okay, so and one of the questions that was asked by one of the attendees has to do with the average award amount, not tying it to any specific project, but can you either give a range of the award levels, award amounts that you've done so far, or can you give a median or an average, something to give people guidance as they think about their interest in submitting?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question too, and I would ask it myself. So first of all, the research budget is roughly $1 million. So it's not a big, endless pot of money. And certainly it's based on the capacity of MRC to manage research projects and also based on economics. But I think the important part is what we're trying to do with that $1 million is place as many small bets as we can. In university programs, typically, and in this call for new market development, we have a hard cap established. It's in the proposal of $100,000. That's total project cost for 1 year of research. So that's I would say the upper limit. And more typically, I would say we are in the $50,000 to $70,000 range. But I know if I put a $100,000 carrot in front of a university, they're going to make the project around $100,000.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's certainly enough to support if you wanted to dedicate a grad student for a year. As you know, a lot of faculty members, they're looking for support in their labs for students. And you can certainly accommodate a student even with overhead and tuition at many institutions. Not all, but many institutions at that level. So
and that's where sometimes cost share comes in, because if we're at that's a hard number. That 100,000 is a pretty hard number.
Sure.
We don't want to. I think we would get a lot of criticism, especially at the university level. They're fairly early stage. Usually, they're high technical risk. We just can't, put all of our eggs in sort of long pipeline to market type applications. So we put that at that limit there. I should also point out
Mike, I think you froze on us there. All right. Well, we'll give Mike a minute to get back here. Hey, Mike, you froze for a minute. Maybe if you could back up just a tad.
I don't know if others can see me, but I seem to.
We can see you. We can see you and we can hear you now. Okay. You're still there, Mike. We can hear you now.
Okay.
Great. So if you could just back up maybe a minute on what you were saying. We were talking about, supporting a student, and then I think you had some comments after that, and if they're relevant, continue. If not, we can move on to another question.
Yeah, so it's about funding multi-year programs.
Oh, sure.
this is something that we try to shy away from. I know some professors might look at something to take a student through grad school. One-year programs are likely where we would want to stop, because then we want it to advance the stage where the phase 2 type project, we want more industry engagement, and we would also and I don't want to say we're absolutely against phase 2 type projects. If the work is promising and there's merit, we certainly will consider it. But something that would take a grad student all the way through to graduation is not the right program.
Have you all gotten applications from, or have you approached schools that offer kind of interdisciplinary capstone type projects that are 1 year in length? Where they do a fixed price, $50,000, would have 4 students work for a semester or 2 semesters on, a project. I mean, because that seems to me there's some potential synergies for those type of applications where they bring in a business school person, a chemie, right, a material scientist. Have you done that, or have you funded anything like that?
Not with MRC. I have done that in my industry experience. I've done that, and you're right. It's an excellent way to get an interdisciplinary team together for a fairly low cost. And I'm open to it, but no, we're still only just 2 years old, so we have really looked at this predominantly from a project basis. Again, everything we do has to have sort of line of sight to impact of the industry. So while I'm open to it, I've generally looked at those things as great ways to develop talent for future use. So
well, if you do,
I'm open.
Listen though, if you do fund one, I expect a steak dinner. Okay, so
okay.
All right, great. All right, well, listen, we've got some more technical related questions, and I want to get to some of these. A question came in: are you looking into biochar as a use for the recycled wood from mattresses?
We did look at it in a study. We actually published a study on potential end uses for wood beyond mulch, and that biochar was one we did not decide at that time, if I'm correct, to pursue, only because it eventually winds up being combusted, and that would not be included in recycling calculations. Now, there are other uses for sort of carbonizing materials, which we have funded. So, and one example that's on our website is a university in Kansas, it's Kansas Polymer Research Center, is carbonizing fibers and making battery electrodes. So that kind of thermal recycling is something we're very interested in, because the end product there is a nice positive value chain, and it's a sustainable product for the energy storage industry, which we all know is a pretty important thing to grow. So that's an example of thermal decomposition, if you will, of the products to upcycle into new end uses. Biochar is kind of on the fence.
Got it. All right, let me move on to another technical question. What are the challenges for converting mattress components to post-consumer products? Are pasteurization, sterilization techniques involved?
The challenges, maybe I want to understand the question a little better.
Sure.
What are the challenges that we're facing?
I'll reread the question. What are the challenges for converting the mattress components to post-consumer products? And then there was ... Are pasteurization, sterilization techniques involved?
Okay, so in some end markets, so if we look at a good example is in textile recycling. Part of the process at the user side is to certainly treat the materials with chemicals. They're shredded up and then they're treated with both flame retardants and with detergents and heat to sterilize the components so that they're safe for use. There are no facilities in the recycling centers themselves to undertake this. So that would probably be the challenge that you would face. Fortunately, since these are kind of consumer products, you're not usually dealing with something that's particularly hazardous. chemically wise. But yeah, certainly you get just about everything you can think of in a mattress can be an issue. The other thing I'd point out is bed bugs are always a challenge, and there is a program to recognize that and keep those out of the recycle stream. So some of these things are challenges that mattresses are discarded because they're not suitable to enter the recycling process.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, unmet needs there perhaps but thus far, I think informing the public and putting in safeguards in the recycle process, the network, has really not generated a strong need for that, but certainly post-product there are some issues.
So another question came in about the state of the textile materials. For example, the cotton that's in the mattresses. Are they reusable? Are they in such a condition that you can do that, or are they not in such a condition?
So it does depend on how easily the layers are separated. So it's a design for recycling question. Cotton, we can get fairly clean cotton out there, and the cotton that is recycled, I've actually been in cotton textile recycling facilities. Really fascinating. They shred them up. They make take this, that carbon bale, and they actually make fibers of materials. They can treat those with chemicals to make sure that they're hygienic, and they go into a lot of things like acoustic panels today. But cotton is a problematic waste stream in that we just don't generate a lot of it, and so you have the cost of logistics. I was starting to weigh the value of the material. I mentioned the university in Kansas, one of their programs also to carbonize cotton fibers.
Got it. Okay, another just kind of specific technical question, Mike. Are there any high loft or high denier fibers that can be recovered from a typical mattress?
High loft?
I'm just reading the question. I don't know what that is. High loft or high denier?
Oh, denier. Oh, okay. The high carbon or high thread count kind of fibers. I think that's what that means.
Okay.
So what we don't know just yet, and this is the product variance, composition variance studies there, is exactly what is the diversity of fibers that we see in the quilt toppers and that. Most of them are either polyester, all polyester, cotton polyester blends. These are a nightmare to recycle because you've got here, cotton, and you have to separate it from the synthetic fibers and do so in a way that recovers both streams. So if you want to make building block chemicals from those materials, it's challenging when they're mixed like that. So most commonly they're chopped up and put in as a filler and carpet underlay applications. But yeah, I think textile recycling is kind of one of these recycling streams that are in their infancy or adolescence. A lot of people don't realize that clothing is a major component of landfills, about 14% of landfills. So I'm actually talking quite a bit with people who are knowledgeable about textile recycling, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation in this area.
Okay, just another question for you here. Have you explored or are you aware of pre-competitive IP research centers at universities that bring together multiple companies or industries or groups such as yourselves in this space that might be a natural platform for advancing what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's one, I'm not aware of one for the mattress recycling industry itself. It is one program that we have. We have a program in MRC called SP2, and you can learn more about it on the website. But it is something we're looking at to create a forum where collaboration can occur in a pre-competitive way. It's something that actually I just read one of the policy documents that we're developing on that just yesterday. So
Okay.
look for more coming there, because I think it's absolutely key to making progress here is bringing interdisciplinary collaboration together.
Well, especially too, if you want to leverage your investments and try to get maybe government money involved, it might be a natural, a natural next step. So.
Yeah, I would also point out that some have asked us to help participate, lending either material support or just in-kind support to research grants that are out there, NSF or DOE or whatever. I'm very familiar with how those processes work,
Sure.
and we are also open to those as well, provided our role is something that is aligned with our strategy.
Sure. Okay. Well, great. Well, listen, we had all the questions that were asked answered. Mike, once again, I want to thank you and your colleagues at the MRC for being proactive in trying to expand your network. We're committed to trying to do everything we can to make sure more people are aware of the program, and as we look forward to watching its evolution.